Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Tom Davis here. Speaking from a slightly different location. I have two dogs here. I hope they don't like make it too much of a distraction. Okay, so as I said, we're now in the second half of the semester, basically, or just about approaching it. And I am going to be doing more about the reporting end of things than the actual writing end of things. Um, so anyway, by now, you should have actually, I know a bunch of you emailed me over the weekend, but I didn't expect it to, I guess, I expect people to kind of actually, really kind of like look at these videotapes as soon as possible. So, if you wait like 4 or 5 days, it can be run a little late, especially if we're pushing up against the deadline of an assignment. Okay, so it's fine. I'm glad you reached out to me. That's great, but just keep that in mind. One thing I want to tell everybody is that my father is actually in hospice, which is usually what people go before the end of their lives, and so I might be a bit distracted by things, especially things like grading paper stuff like that. I don't know. I've been holding on to that and keeping that up, regardless. But just in case any kind of issues arise regarding that, just keep that in mind. I'll be emailing you whatever. If something were major to the word develop, especially. Okay. All right. So why don't we actually like just go through this release again? Now let me just share the screen right here. Okay. Um, so, and it's just taking me a little bit of time. Sorry about this. Um, let's just wait till we get there. There we go. Okay. Um, okay. So let me call up the release. Okay. So you have this release right here. And as I said in the previous tapes and in the notes, that this first paragraph is not the lead. So what you do is you have typically, and this is what chapter 19, which you're also assigned to read, deals with, is actually the whole idea of actually dealing with public relations. And remember, trying to keep in mind that actually what public relations does as a different objective essentially than what you have, okay? Doesn't mean you have to like copy everything they say exactly. It doesn't mean you have to take everything they say verbatim. What you have to do is you have to take what they say and essentially make a story, okay? This is probably the number one way now, largely because news is 24/7 and it has to move very quickly. In the old days, you used to actually like call up somebody and get a statement, that sort of thing, talking to you about what needs to be done here, what needs to be done there, what happened here, what happened there. Um, Now they actually like to do it this way, and they hire people to actually to essentially shape the news in the way they want it delivered. Okay, but their audience is the media. Okay, your audience is the actual public. Okay, all right. So you want to make sure that what you write is what's important for the public to know, and what comes at the top of the story is what's important for the public to see first. Okay, and that's why I say that this first paragraph ain't it. Okay. And what the analogy I always use is, okay, so you have like some changes happening at a corporation. Again, you have to think of this corporation on a level of like Disney or something like that. Okay. Or maybe not quite that, but so whatever changes are made at this company are going to maybe affect the economy. They're going to affect the consumer mind, the consumer buying product company, consumer buying public. Okay, people want to know how they're going to be personally affected. They don't really give a crap so much what happens on Wall Street unless it affects their job. They don't really care about like whether a company goes down unless it affects their quality of life. Okay. So what you have here essentially is a it's a fake company, of course, but it's a leading entertainment provider like Netflix or something. Um, that basically is going to just give me 1 second, please. All right. So anyway, back to what we were talking about. Um, so anyway, so you have to think to yourselves, I mean, like when things happen, that affect maybe the reputation of a company or something like that, or maybe even like not just the reputation because it may make them look bad, or maybe like it might have some sort of impact on the quality or something like that. people, that's when people will take notice. So when you see like, so what I suggest to people is actually you go through this release and maybe even like, this is what you do when you collect information, you rank in order what you think is maybe the most important thing to the public to know, okay? So you take like maybe this first paragraph right here, okay? I already told you this ain't the lead, all right? But think about this, okay? If you are going to go shopping at a department store or something like that, or a Walmart or whatever, okay, I don't care. And or even like, I don't know, is the Gap still around, or your clothing store or something like that? And they had and let's say Gap, I don't even know if they're around anymore. Let's say they had a broad restructuring of management roles. Would you really care? You know, do you really care? You're always trying to go for the largest audience possible. Okay. So that's why I say that's not to say that this doesn't go in the story. It should go in the story. I just shouldn't see this paragraph in the first half of the story. Okay. At the very least. Okay. But there's stuff that happened that caused this to happen. That's much more important, much more interesting to the reader. Okay. Now you look at here, you have the office of the chief executive was formed and who's involved. Okay. By the way, and like I often see things like people will write down like almost like stenographers verbatim how it's written in the press release. You don't have to write Mr. or Mrs. or anything like that. I mean, that's just the way that their press release is written. I mean, that's their style. Typically, news style does not have what they call courtesy titles, Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. or whatever. They don't have anything like that. Okay. So what you need to do is basically just write the story for the general public. You write me on, which is what this name is right here. Okay. You don't write, Mr. Meal, right? Just keep that in mind. And you're not doing the company's bidding. Okay. You are doing the bidding for whatever news organization you work for. So then you have the people who are named. So that's one thing to take into consideration. Is that something that's maybe the most interesting thing to know about in this? Different people. Okay. What Meon's career was and what he did before. Is that interesting to people? And I know my friend Bill Borden, who you should have contacted already, just is it probably put some like inside jokes in here. Sorry about that. But basically, like, this is supposed to kind of almost like throw you off, like, oh, this kind of weird stuff, like Cligo a day. I can't pronounce that. I mean, that's meant to, that's like maybe it would like be something that satisfied people's weird curiosity. But is it something that really kind of impacts them? Just from a curiosity standpoint, yes. Beyond that, no. Okay, so you have that. TV wrestling business, is that the most interesting thing in this story? Okay, the management structure and what they claim will not change and that sort of thing. The corporate structure will not change one iota. Again, you can like take these different things and list them. And the licensing and intellectual property, okay. The resignation of Mark Bronson, taken as a result of the inconsistent with the code of conduct, okay. And of course, his actions, they believe, reflected poorly on Bronson's judgment, and that sort of thing. Okay. So you have to kind of, and they're going to say things like it doesn't reflect the performance of the company. Well, that's what they're saying, but how do you know? I'm going to show you an example of a company that like really got taken down by its reputation. And but I mean, it's still a thriving company. I shouldn't say that, but really took a big blow because of it. Because when we talk about companies on this level, it's not like they're going to go out of business necessarily, but they're on the New York stock market, and if they actually what matters to them is not just making money, but making profits. And they actually succeed only by the amount of profit they make, not just the amount of money they make. If they have a down year in profits, then they do things like cut back. Okay, it's almost like a loss to them. Okay, so that matters. So reputation might factor into that. Okay, so that's what you really have to look for. And look for this release. What you need to do is you need to find that area. I say lead, really the theme. Find that place that's the theme. Okay, last two paragraphs. And then just giving away. And then what you need to do is you email Bill Borden and you say, like, look, this is what I think the theme is. And basically, like, what you need to do is ask a very broad question. It's very simple, conversational speak. What happened and why? Okay, that's all. What happened and why? All right. And then what he's going to do is he's going to produce, once you know what that theme is, what the an Excel spreadsheet and a Q&A. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that information and attribute it to the documents. You can just call them megalomania documents. That's what they are, okay? The one thing is actually a voucher that shows expenses. I can't really go into more depth, but you really need to like take a look at that stuff, okay? The expenses, because they relate to the big thing that happened here. They will relate to the big change that happened here. That stuff should be high up in the story, okay? For real, it really should be high up in the story, okay? Um, so yeah, so anyway, that's what's going on. Okay, with that, please keep that in mind. Please, again, it's not too late to like, I mean, you're gonna get this on Monday. It's not too late to ask me questions up until late Monday night, and then you're gonna have like 2 weeks to actually rewrite this. Okay, how about that? Of course, one of those weeks includes spring break, but you're gonna have. I'm posting this right here. I'm sorry, I'm getting a pinwheel. Here we go. So this is the main one right here. Okay. Of course, you should have, some of you said you just watched the video now. You really should have watched it earlier in the week, but whatever. I mean, it's only like a 45-minute video, but whatever. All right. And then this, like I said, is not, as I'm recording this right now, it's not actually posted, but and I'm just waiting for this to get around to where I need to go. But I'm sorry, just give another second. There's going to be an entry for the rewrite, which will be due on the 18th, I believe. Oh boy, it's going really slow. So you do have 2 weeks to rewrite. I realize that nobody wants to do work during spring break, but I mean, I had to set some deadline. I thought giving it like Friday would be too quick. So you're gonna have a week, 2 weeks from 2 weeks from when this is posted, 2 weeks from today, when you're watching this, okay, March 18th. All right. You submit it right here. All right, Megalomania rewrite. You can also contact Bill Borden again if you have additional questions. I assume people will. I assume I'll probably be asking people to get additional questions answered. Okay. All right. All right. So as I showed you, like with the armor robbery case, that sort of thing, and what happened there, you can't really like take people's like word for it. You can't really like take everything at face value. Many things at face value. What you have here essentially is like, and that, but especially when dealing with public relations, you really have to actually like play not just reporter but editor, okay? And that's what chapter 19 really deals with, okay? Journalists and PR practitioners need each other. Journalists want to know what is happening in different sectors of the community, and PR practitioners work with journalists to get their stories clients for the news. So there's a relationship there, and a lot of actually people who actually work in journalism move on to public relations. Sometimes people just start right out. Sometimes it's the opposite. I've had people see people actually do the opposite, but that's typically a lot of public relations agencies or corporate or companies or whatever. They want people to in journalism to do their public relations for them because A, they know how to write, okay, and they know how to get their message out, and B, they have contacts and things like that. So, what is PR? Well, public relations is planned and continuous communication designed to promote an organization's image, products, or services to the public. Now, I've had people who have I've done this assignment before, okay? I've had people who have like made a big deal about how they buried the lead, essentially, put the theme of the story essentially like low down in the press release, that sort of thing. Look, I mean, that's not a scandal, okay? That's just what they do. That's their job. Their job is to actually just really kind of promote for the company, okay? Doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, it's not really a profession for me. I actually interviewed for a PR job one time, and I didn't like it 5 minutes into the interview, but that's just me, okay? But yeah, I mean, you are actually like, and in a lot of ways, that's a good thing. Okay, you're actually doing something that's going to help the company stay afloat and basically, maintain its image. Okay, you're obviously not going to necessarily promote. You're going to answer questions. You make sure that like the media is like satisfied, because if you don't answer questions, that just leads to more suspicion, and then the media like comes up with stuff that maybe helps fill the gap. Okay, and then they use anonymous sources to get info and that sort of thing. Okay, so you want to actually like really be truthful and like be out there and be connecting to the public, but at the same time, you want to be promoting the brand. Okay. The overall objective of this field is to promote the common get product, or the client and get its name, product, or service into the news without paying for advertising. Well, and at the same time, also what's called spin control. You probably heard of spin. That's basically where you have something that, people are essentially like spinning something to basically make it look as though it's not as bad as people make it seem to be. But, I mean, you have like public relations people like all over the place, government agencies, the Federal Trade Commission. I mean, deals with a lot of boring stuff like trade, but they want to show that they're actually like out there and helping people. So what they'll do is they'll actually put out a press release that's showing that they do more than just deal with trade, commerce, that sort of thing, business, that they're protecting kids from stealth advertising and digital media. So they're going to actually like promote stuff like that. And then you're going to see like press releases. They're not always written in typical like journalistic style, like this one right here with a long, very long first paragraph, okay, with 2 sentences. But it's going to be similar. It's going to be similar where they're going to try to promote their most important thing they think is at the top of the press release, okay? And it shows here, when there's like any kind of disasters or problems or something like that, that's the public relations people usually out front. This is Goodwill, which is a secondhand clothing kind of place. You can see that, they want people just to know it's not just a secondhand clothing kind of place, but you can shop online with a purpose, create jobs in local communities with your Cyber Monday shopping. This holiday season, give your Cyber Monday gift purchases even more meaning by helping create jobs in local communities by making bids and purchases on Goodwill shop. And this is a 2-sentence lead, but basically they're trying to present their most important information first. Again, it's not always the best written thing in the world, but it is actually something that they believe gets their message across. And what the journalist does is they think it's important enough, and many times these press releases are written in a way that's suitable for journalists. Because they will have the most important thing at the top. So basically, that actually makes the journalist job even easier. Okay. And then a lot of them also, of course, they do social media, and a lot of their mission actually is to go right to the public. Okay. They want to actually a lot of times even skip the media actually and get now because of social media, they can do that. Okay. So, but people still go to the media, so they are aware of that, and they try to make sure that the media serves as their vehicle, okay, to get the news out, okay. Public relations practitioners use various news media to get their information about their client to the public. They determine which media outlets will best serve their purposes. They also know the writing styles, deadlines, and other procedures of each target medium. So, I mean, you're going to see this actually. It's funny because like you see that in like the media, like in the news media. Now there's like a political divide now, and you'll see like things that are considered Republican, I guess, being advertised on Fox. You'll see things maybe they're considered Democrat being advertised on MSNBC. I've seen things like get a Ronald Reagan coin on Fox News, stuff like that. The whole thing with being a patriot has seemed to be like co-opted by the Republican Party, whatever. I don't know, but I see that more advertised on Fox News than I do on MSNBC, which I mean, both sides are just patriotic, I would say, I'd like to think. They're going to do things like the public relations practitioners, advertisers, whatever. They're going to work together and hand and like try to get advanced stories, things promoting things. Okay. So you get out there, you see it, you get to discover it before it's even released. Okay. There's a thing called embargo where they actually like go to news organizations and say, we want you to know about this, get ahead of this. And they make the news media feel good because you feel like you're on top of everything. And the idea there is that, they want you to hold the release until the information is actually supposed to become public. Okay. That's like a kind of a PR technique. Okay. I'm kind of doing that now with you guys with the Megalomania thing. You're actually going to release it once you submit your thing on by Monday. Okay. Tips for effective press releases. Journalists get their ideas and information from myriad sources, different places. Yet a lack of quality news releases causes most journalists to dismiss news releases outright. Journalists only use press releases that are newsworthy and well written. So yeah, you do have to write them well. Okay. And then like it actually shows you a little bit here about essentially like what goes into a good news release having like contact information, like place to go to for your information, making sure that the data is up there so you know that it's actually new and fresh. There is like having links to like places you can go and involving the company. Again, and they often like have like a headline. I've talked about headlines before, but their headlines are usually like these big black and white, sorry, things that are like uppercase and blasted in your face, so it's easier for Michiganders to mask right with free KN95, right? Face coverings to protect them from COVID-19. Okay, it is the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services or whatever. So they're basically trying to like really grab your attention right from the get-go. Okay. All right. So, and then a good press release that's written like much like the way we've been writing stories. Actually, I mean, I showed you like how some of them write like 2-sentence leads, something like that, but they really should be writing them almost like news stories. They really should be writing them better than that. And there's nothing that a reporter likes more to have a story rewritten or pre-written for them. Okay. Obviously, like you don't want to like tell people about something that's been happening like already. So you want to make it timely, and like I said, so oftentimes like ahead of the actual event. You use the journalism 5 Ws. There's an H there: who, what, where, how, why, when. You write well. I mean, all these different things that actually go into a story that we've talked about. Proximity, localize the information. If it's like something that, if you're a local paper or something like that, and you're a local news station, and you're a national company, you're going to try to show them why it's more important for New Brunswick than you're going to like show them maybe why it's more important for California. Okay. News media often get besieged by individuals and organizations seeking free publicity. Metropolitan news organizations receive thousands of news releases each week. Basically your first task is to identify a central point. If there isn't one, then you discard it, or if it's buried, you use that. And if the central point is there, then you need to find the relevant information, scrap the rest, or in this megalomania thing, you can use the entire press release, but you need to put it down, or you got to fill in the holes. Okay. It says editors rarely use news releases as submitted, nor do they simply repackage a news release. They know the same news releases are sent to many news organizations, and they want their story to be different. Some editors use releases primarily as a source for ideas and assign reporters to confirm this accurate information, but also to gather more information and write a story, especially if they find like an angle in there that actually really like kind of explodes on people. Okay. Really like goes beyond the pale. Okay. You want to avoid things like limited interest, like some of this stuff in this bronze megalomania press release is limited interest. I mean, do people really give a crap about? I mean, I know people care about wrestling, but how many people really care about pro wrestling? Okay, but at the same time, like many people apparently will connect with this leading entertainment company. They want to know if it's in good shape or not. Okay, they want to know if they're being, told the truth, tried events, things that are like bogus. Buried news, obviously that's a big one. Okay, we just talked about that. You want to like again avoid the wordiness you might find in the news release or something like that, and write it as though it's a news story that actually has like lean, mean information in it. Okay. You want to be an advertisement. You want to have like they call a puff piece. Just basically repeat what they say and be a stenographer. Okay. And obviously you want it, particularly in this particular case with megalomania, you don't want to just take a one-sided story where you just have their point of view and all the wonderful things they're doing. Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's what they're trying to show you in this press release is all the wonderful things they're doing. Okay. So you don't want to just be that. Okay. Now, what I'm going to show you actually is a video showing you about, again, this is a much grander scale, okay, than what's happening with megalomania, okay, but it goes to show that even with a big company or like on the size of Exxon, that you're not, when something bad happens and it's like somebody's mistake, it may be something like one simple mistake they made, or something can have like ramifications that like goes like right through a company and can shake its reputation, and not only that, it really changes bottom line. And it could cause them to be sued. What's happening with megalomania right here is something that actually could lead to lawsuits. Okay. It could be something even along the lines of perhaps like misogyny, sexual harassment, that sort of thing. Okay. So there's a lot of like tentacles, as I say, to this megalomania story. And what I'm going to show you right now is something that happened. Now, again, this is much larger scale, of course, but just going to show you like how one man's decision, Captain Hazelwood of the Exxon Valdez, one man's decision basically to drink and to not really like watch after a ship can lead to like a disaster that is still talked about to this day. Um, and even though the company is basically similarly trying to spin it and say like, well, we're doing all this to like, we've paid enough money to like take care of this and blah, blah, blah. This video will show you that even 10 years later, it was still shaking its company's reputation, all because of one man's decision, maybe like a 5-minute mistake he made, 10-minute mistake he made that could have changed everything. Okay. And that's what I want you to keep in mind when you think of this story of megalomania is like it's one man's decisions that actually could change and shape reputation and the bottom line of the company. Okay. Um, so let me go to back to share. Okay. Again, so the Exxon Valdez struck the Alaska coast in 1989 and destroyed many wildlife, and oil leaked all over the place. It's very similar to the BP oil spill from almost like 12 or 13 or 14 years ago. That's basically destroyed the Gulf Coast along Alabama and Mississippi. The people used to go swimming there and everything. Now they can't anymore. Well, here, like, it's not just a matter of reputation and the destruction of wildlife, which is absolutely horrible, of course, but now this destroyed like a whole fishing industry. And it shows that like, a lot of this stuff wasn't taken into account when this first happened. Okay. The ramifications. But again, it just goes to show that, you have a company that's basically saying, like, trying to tell you that, look, this bad thing happened, but we took care of it and that we're good people. But that's not really the story. The story is that, like, the impact, what really, one bad decision led to this impact. And then 10 years later, that impact is still there. Okay. So you have a company that's going to try to tell you that that's fine. That's part of the story. Like, look at all the good things that happen. That's more newsworthy. But what's more newsworthy is what happens to the general public. Okay. So let's take a look at this one.
10 years ago, the Exxon Valdez, a supertanker carrying 53 million gallons of crude oil, ran aground in the pristine waters of Alaska's Prince William Sound. It was the worst environmental disaster in United States history, killing more wildlife than any other previous catastrophe. On top of that, some 60,000 Alaskans, most involved in fishing, say the oil spill hurt their lives and livelihood. The disaster cost Exxon $3.5 billion, much of which went towards a massive cleanup effort. And if you talk to Exxon officials these days, they'll tell you that Prince William Sound has recovered, that everyone hurt by the spill has been compensated. But if you go back to the Sound, as we did last month, and talk to the people who live there, you'll hear another story altogether. This is the beach at Sleepy Bay, about 65 miles downwind from where the Exxon Valdez ran aground. Take a look at all of this and you get a sense of the pristine beauty that is Alaska. But turn over a rock on this beach and you're likely to find oil. Government scientists say that that oil from the spill is as toxic today as it was 10 years ago. So that's the oil right
That's
there.
the oil. That's leaking up from underneath. That's toxic stuff. Looks like a little toxic landmine.
Bruce Wright heads a task force looking into the Exxon Valdez oil spill for the National Marine Fisheries Service, a federal agency. You sure this is Exxon Valdez oil?
It's Exxon Valdez oil. There's no question about that.
Wow.
See, that's all Hardy oil. You can smell that.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to smell too much because it's real volatile still. And this whole expanse of beach is covered with this stuff.
This isn't the only place you'll find it here.
You'll find oil on lots of beaches in Prince William Sound.
The oil we were shown at Sleepy Bay spilled into Prince William Sound March 24th, 1989, just after midnight, when the Exxon Valdez, a ship the size of 3 football fields, ran aground on a reef, even though the reef was plainly marked on charts in the wheelhouse. Eventually, oil from the tanker's ruptured hull spread over 1,300 miles of Alaskan coastline. The death toll was staggering. 250,000 seabirds, 3,000 otters, hundreds of bald eagles. And despite Exxon's attempts to clean up the mess, government scientists say oil from the spill continues to take a toll on marine life in Prince William Sound.
The fish on the left is a normal pink salmon, and the fish on the right is a pink salmon that's been exposed to low levels of Exxon Valdez oil.
So that bulging is a result of the oil spill?
That bulging is the result of exposure to oil, yes. Usually leads to death of the fish early on.
And are there salmon that look like this in Prince William Sound today?
You could go out and find salmon that look like this in the oil part of Prince William Sound.
However, Exxon officials continue to insist that oil from the spill is not responsible for long-term damage to marine life in Prince William Sound. And they say that the vast majority of species were never affected by the spill or have fully recovered. But according to a government report released last month, 21 out of 23 species have yet to recover. While government scientists say they cannot prove it, many local fishermen argue that the spill is to blame for the current shortage of certain fish in Prince William Sound. We used to have 275 boats that fished in the fishery every year out the sound, and now you've got about 90 to 100 boats that participate. I mean, half the fleet's gone bankrupt. These fishermen from Cordova, Alaska, say that lingering effects from the oil spill have caused a sharp decline in herring. Herring that were once abundant and provided a good living for Ross Mullins. It's fished in Prince William Sound for the last 35 years. When we're out here on the water, this really looks pretty nice. Yeah, it is. It's nice. I mean, it looks nice, but there's a big difference. And the fish that don't show up, how are you going to look out there and see, those fish didn't show up, you know? And when you hear Exxon say that we've spent a couple $1 billion on this cleanup, they've spent the money. You know, they came in here and they put thousands of people on the beach cleaning up rocks and that sort of thing, but there's still oil out there. Sylvia Lang, who's been fishing commercially since she was a teenager, says the shortage of fish since the spill has caused the value of their state-issued fishing permits to plummet.
A permit cost $300,000 in 1988 because you could probably gross that in 1988. It's worth $27,000 now because you're lucky if you get that now.
And the depreciation value of that permit you attribute directly to the oil spill.
Without a doubt.
The story will continue after this.
These fishermen got hammered, and they're still getting hammered. Brian O'Neill is the lead attorney representing the Cordova fishermen and tens of thousands of other Alaskans in a civil suit against Exxon, and Captain Joseph Hazelwood was the skipper of the oil tanker when it ran aground. In 1994, a jury determined that both Exxon and Captain Hazelwood had acted recklessly.
The general public, from what I can see, perceives me as some drunken fool.
After the
Wow.
spill, Hazelwood, who now works as a clerk in the Manhattan law firm that represents him, was accused of being intoxicated and not at the helm of the tanker when it ran aground. A simple question. Were you intoxicated that night?
No.
You did have some drinks before the ship left port, though.
Yes,
How much did you have to drink?
3 drinks, possibly a sip of the fourth
Perhaps a fourth sip of what?
vodka. On the
Vodka.
rocks.
Your license to drive a car was suspended at the time.
Yes,
The
it was.
grounding. That was because of a drunk driving conviction?
Yes, from 6 months prior to that.
It seems a little incongruous that you can't drive a car at home, but you can pilot a tanker.
Well, the Coast Guard took no exception with it, and it was something that occurred in my personal life. It had nothing to do with my job.
Hazelwood was acquitted in a 1990 criminal trial of having been intoxicated while piloting the Exxon Valdez. Blood tests that initially indicated he was drunk turned out to have been mishandled. He insists the grounding of the supertanker was the result of a simple mistake.
Okay, thank you.
To see just what that mistake was, we took Captain Hazelwood to this simulator, which is used to train ship captains. Programmed into the simulator was this view from the bridge of the Exxon Valdez 10 minutes before it ran aground. The tanker was heading for a reef marked by a blinking light on the horizon, which we highlighted. Hazelwood says he left the ship's third mate with instructions to make a right turn away from the reef. The tanker was abreast of what he says that night was a clearly visible landmark. So all you have to do is get even with that.
This light here that's coming
And
up.
you make a right turn. The third mate, who was granted immunity from prosecution, admitted he failed to execute the right turn, which had been ordered. At the time, Captain Hazelwood was in his cabin doing paperwork. When did you realize something was wrong?
The phone rang. And as I picked up the receiver, he said, I think we're in trouble. At that moment, I felt a shudder. I got sick. My stomach.
Physically sick.
Physically sick.
Because you knew.
Well, I don't know if it was panic or terror. I knew something was dreadful.
And when could you actually see that something was dreadful?
Well, as I walked out and came over and I could see the oil boiling up to the surface of the water.
Do you personally think that you made any mistakes that night?
Well, in retrospect, in hindsight being 2020, of course, I never would have left the bridge if I had any idea that what was going to happen.
If you had remained on the bridge that night, do you think the ship would have run aground?
I don't, I can't perceive me missing that turn.
Captain Hazelwood will be heading back to Alaska this summer to begin 1,000 hours of court-ordered community service. His assignment is to pick up trash from state highways and parks. As for Exxon, the jury that found the company had acted recklessly ordered it to pay $5 billion in punitive damages to the fishermen and others who say they were hurt by the spill. It's been 5 years since you won that judgment. How much of the $5 billion has Exxon paid? None of it. Nothing?
Not a cent.
Why?
They have spent most of the last 5 years filing motion after motion to get the judgment overturned.
In all, Exxon filed more than 25 motions, prompting the federal judge overseeing the trial to express concern that the company will devise any possible procedural roadblock to defer payment of the judgment. The judge also expressed disappointment with Exxon's legal tactics, writing at one point, Exxon has acted as a Jekyll and Hyde, behaving laudably in public and deplorably in private. Exxon is appealing the case to a higher court.
The judgment earns interest at about 6%. And Exxon makes about 18% on money that it invests. So by not paying, Exxon makes money. In fact, it makes so much money that by not paying, the interest in about 6.5 years will pay the judgment.
How do you respond to those who say that you and your clients are going after Exxon because they are such a wealthy company?
My clients and I sued Exxon because Exxon promised it would safely transit Prince William Sound with oil, and Exxon made a fortune off of that oil. And Exxon didn't live up to its responsibilities and spill that oil and ruin an awful lot of people's lives.
Although oil from the Exxon Valdez never actually reached Cordova, people who live here say it was a disaster that devastated this little town. Before the spill, Cordova had been among the top 10 fishing ports in the United States. 5 years later, it had dropped to number 60. And social scientists who came here after the spill found significantly higher rates of alcohol abuse and depression. A former mayor committed suicide, leaving behind a note that blamed in part stress caused by the spill.
Everything has taken an impact from that 1989 spill.
You still feel it?
Oh, yeah.
Jack Hopkins says, in 1989, Exxon pledged to make fishermen whole. The company did distribute $25 million in Cordova that year. But he says the $60,000 he got has been nowhere near enough to cover his business losses and make him whole.
I think what I am is in the hole. You know, I'm having a hard time making boat payments.
But isn't fishing cyclical? I mean, don't you have down years and up years?
Yeah, you do. But cycles are one thing. Total failures are another. And in these years of failures, you had Southeast Alaska booming, biggest runs in history. You had to the west, you had strong runs, and here we had failures.
Exxon told us, quoting, those directly impacted by the spill were immediately and fully compensated.
That's total BS. That's bogus.
Exxon declined our request for an on-camera interview, but the company did send us this letter, which says in part, the oil spill was a tragic accident, which we deeply regret. We are appealing the $5 billion punitive damage verdict because we believe it is unjust and excessive. They see themselves as a company that's already spent $3.5 billion. Why is there need for more punishment?
Now,
More money?
when you and I do something that the law says we must be punished for it, it's gotta hurt. And they're not hurting. Their stock has tripled since 1989. Where's the hurt? Here's the hurt. The hurt is here in this little community that has lost its sense of future. We have the hurt. I don't see where Exxon has the hurt.
All right, let me just stop the share. Okay, actually, we're not done yet because actually I mistakenly said that we talked about the Alma robbery case, but I didn't. But that's also relevant to what we're dealing with here too. Anyway, let me just first talk about this. So anyway, so it's interesting about Captain Hazelwood said, I had a few drinks, I wasn't blah, blah, blah. Did that really affect his judgment of whether to actually stay in the front of the vessel or the back or the middle? I don't know, but he did admit he made a mistake and he's liable for it apparently because he's due to community service. So, you know, this company Exxon, it's interesting because I mean, doesn't really matter whether they're number one or number two company in the world, doesn't really matter, but it can, because it could affect things like profits, their stocks, everything else, and their reputation, okay? This was the company that was the leading gas company of all, started as the Standard Oil Company. It started as Esso, actually. It was called Esso, as an SO. Standard Oil, founded, I believe, by John David Rockefeller. You might know that name, or that last name at least. And you know, they rebranded into Exxon in the 70s. And you know, suddenly like they became like not the biggest, it went from being like the biggest gas company to having this tag that'll be forever applied to them as residing over and causing the largest, probably worst wildlife disaster in world history, perhaps, or beyond. I don't know. So, you know, but again, you know, at the end, you can see their spin was that basically we're doing everything we can. We've done everything. And in fact, we're like almost environmentalists. Look how much money we spent already, you know. What your job is to basically get ahead of that, put that move, you know, their job, they want that letter at the end of that video to be at the front of the video. Okay. Your job is to put that at the back of the video and put at the front of the video what really matters and the impact on the people, the economy, everything, the wildlife and everything else that still lingered 10 years after, and to this, even to this day, 35 years later. Okay. That's what essentially your job is, to basically like it, you know, put what needs to be put at the front. Okay. Now, one thing I was going to discuss, and I didn't really get to it, and I thought I had to, but I didn't. I thought I did, but I didn't, was, you know, it's also something, we had another chapter that we actually were reading before this, and I know we got interrupted by the megalomania, and it deals a lot with, and that's chapter 17, it deals with a lot, some of the same stuff and how the news is released, and it deals with like how, you know, and I was actually going to get into this a little bit later, but you know, how like a lot of the information that the reporters deal with actually comes from essentially like the most basic sources, especially when you're first starting out, and those sources can be you know, typically like your police and your town government. Okay. So anyway, that's when you look at chapter 17, that's actually what they talk about a lot. But what you often get from that, from those sources isn't necessarily spun the way that it needs to be spun. You know, or it's not presented in a way it needs to be presented. That so that the public can understand, and actually the public has a right to know. Okay. You know, you have your town governments that actually produce information, especially like things like taxes and stuff like that. And the money that comes out of people's pockets. The police report on like crime and that sort of thing, but not just that, but traffic accidents, all those different things that happen. And that might affect people's quality of life, but also like because people have compassion and things like that. So, you know, what they're gonna do is they're gonna typically come out with things that essentially will, you know, not necessarily make them look bad. But necessarily they're gonna basically come out with things that are basically like make them look good, much like Exxon did right here. Okay. Now, let me just go now back to the Zoom here and share the screen here. All right, so yeah, now this is actually like, well, the police don't use, a lot of times actually don't put out like a press release. They'll actually, a lot of times they'll just put out, like actually a police report, which is not written in a way that like the press can totally understand, believe me. And a lot of times, but they will make an attempt often. I'm calling up Facebook here actually, and oftentimes actually what they do is they put stuff on Facebook, okay? And let me just try, I'm just dealing with it a little bit slowly here. My hometown police department, well, I now live in Metuchen, but where I grew up was Point Pleasant Borough Police. Okay. And I mean, if you look at what they put out there, I mean, it's not, they've been notoriously bad about like releasing crime information. Why do you want to know crime information? Because you want to know like what's happening in your town. You want to know what's happening on your street. You want to know if, and much like the Easter Bunny thing, right? That I talked about, and then mostly you want to know like, you know, okay, what was really behind this? Like, where did it happen? What happened? You know, was it just like, is that a serial killer? Or was it just like a one-time thing? That sort of thing. And you have to sometimes almost like dig to find out information, you know? So this is how like the Point Pleasant Police often release information. They talk, you know, this is February 28th, a few days before. Basically talking about, you know, you know, taking care of yourself, you know, during these storms we've had and stuff like that. I mean, down there you have to worry about things like flooding with the beach. You know, they talk about speed limits and blah blah blah, but you don't see like the bad stuff that may happen, like maybe a knifing on the boardwalk in Point Pleasant Beach or something like that, or well, it's Point Pleasant Borough, whatever. You know, a golf outing, you know, that sort of thing. You know, hosting a coffee event, that sort of thing. I mean, there are actually police departments that will actually release the bad stuff on Facebook, but this particular one does not. So you have to kind of go scratch beyond the surface, okay? And get that info, okay? And let me just call up something here, okay. So, and speaking of which, so there was a story that happened 4 years ago, and it's, you know, it was right around the time of George Floyd, and what happened there, unfortunately. And you know, this particular news publication, when they first reported, actually, this one, I mean, they pretty much reported what everybody else first reported, that there was actually a shooting death in Brunswick, in Glynn County, Georgia. Okay. And, you know, but this is actually like when you scratch beyond the surface and everything, it's also good to do follow-ups and stuff like that. And that's what this newspaper did. A lot of other newspapers didn't, okay? But this one did. But initially they had to come out with a report that basically said police are investigating the shooting death of a 25-year-old Brunswick man Sunday afternoon in the Satia Shores neighborhood in southern Glynn County, according to police reports in the county coroner. Ahmaud Arbery, you might remember that name, died at the scene at 1:08 p.m. of the shooting in Glynn County, okay? And pretty much all this says still is an active investigation. They found the male on the ground bleeding out, and he had died, which is very unfortunate. This is all they had to go on at first, okay? So again, like scratching beneath the surface, seeing what really happened. The police come out and they say things like, and I'm not necessarily blaming them for this, so this is maybe what they had at the time, but look at these different people. I'll tell you, ultimately, there were 3 people convicted in this crime. As you can see right here, initially, all they had was one person who was a suspect. These 2 people were identified as witnesses, which is interesting because how could this person be a witness when he was with this guy who did the shooting? And I guess he was his father. And they had this guy, this one's an interesting one to look at because he was a guy who arrived at the scene, who tried to portray himself as almost like an innocent bystander, sort of, okay? So that's all they had to go on initially, and I mean, and they essentially described these people as witnesses and one suspect. And this is, and again, not written press release format even, not written in news story format, just to get the information out. It's written in chronological order by a police officer. Responded to the intersection of Satia Drive and Holmes Drive in reference to shots fired. While en route, he advised that there had been shots and a man was bleeding out, much like it shows in that news report. Upon arrival, he saw Officer Winslow setting up a perimeter. And then he saw Greg McMichael, who was a witness to the incident. McMichael stated there have been several break-ins in the neighborhood. So initially we get this story about like how they shot this person who they thought was a break-in suspect, okay? And almost the police report was almost kind of shaped that way. McMichael stated he was in his front yard and saw the suspect from the break-ins hauling ass, and that's, they almost describe him as certain, they almost convict the person that was running, jogging, you know, through the neighborhoods. That's what he was simply doing, was jogging on Arbery, as a person who was a suspect in the break-ins. Travis, the guy is running down the street. Let's go. So they grabbed this 357 Magnum, big gun. Okay, claiming it was the same person who was a burglary suspect. Got in the truck, tracked down the unidentified male who was Ahmaud Arbery. Then this other guy named Roddy came, different last name. Okay, and he came. So they turned around and began running back from the direction from which they came, and Roddy attempted to block him. So that guy came in, and this other guy came in and tried to actually stop the guy from getting loose. Okay. He's the one who claimed himself to be a witness or innocent bystander, this guy Roddy. Okay. McMichael stated that they saw the unidentified male and shouted, "Stop, stop, we want to talk to you." McMichael stated that they pulled up beside the male and shouted, "Stop" again, which time they saw Travis exited his truck with a shotgun. McMichael's then claiming he violently attacked him. Right. Okay. Well, if you had a shotgun, pull it, you wouldn't you? And the two men started fighting over the shotgun. Travis fired a shot and a second shot, and the male fell face down on the pavement. Okay. So this is what the story was. And so for so many years, this is all reporters had to go on, you know, but a lot of times they just didn't do their due diligence. We had to do things like rely on tips, you know. We had to do things like people would, who maybe they peeked out through their bedroom window and really saw what happened. Saw that there was really more than one person who was guilty here for what happened. Okay. And like, it wasn't just self-defense, and there was no suspect in the robbery jogging down the street. Okay. But this is all they had to go on at the time. So the reporter really had to do the digging and that sort of thing to get there again. So to get the police's reaction and the suspect's reaction at the end of the story and what really happened at the front of the story. Okay. But sometimes it takes something like, and we've seen this often, a video. And I'm sorry I didn't call this up initially. But it was a video, much like many other incidents of its type, that basically changed everything. Okay. And I want you to listen to this video. I know it might be a little bit hard to hear. And the guy who's driving the truck is this guy, Roddy, the one who claimed to be the innocent bystander, essentially. Okay. Listen to something here that maybe gives away that he's not there just to help out or look at what's happening, that he's maybe up there to do some no good. Might be hard to hear on this tape, but let's give it a shot. Okay. Truck. There's a jogger, Ahmaud Arbery. Click, did you hear the click? It was, and then, you know, before that even shooting, there was the click that was right around here, I guess it was. I'm sorry, it was right around here, I guess, right there. That showed that basically this was a guy coming with a gun, okay, that he was up to no good. And apparently what we found out eventually was that he actually used this particular truck that he's driving in to block Ahmaud Arbery from escaping. And, you know, and then, you know, basically prevented him from fleeing the scene. So, it took that to basically lead to the ultimate conviction of 3 people, not just one. As you can see, found guilty, Travis Michael, malice murder, felony murder. Greg McMichael was not just, well, actually it says not guilty of malice murder, but felony murder guilty, so he was guilty. And here's Roddy, remember, not guilty? Well, look, felony murder. Because he basically participated in the whole scene. He wasn't just a witness. But that all came out largely because of that video. And maybe that video didn't explain everything, okay? But it did actually lead to, it did like, at least like cause some like questions to be raised and like, allowed for further investigation to happen and additional questioning that eventually revealed more details about what these guys were out to do and not just one person, okay? So again, that's like the importance of being reporters really is like really like trying to find what's behind the scenes of things and not just take what's given to you as information, okay? All right, everybody, so that's everything right there. I mean, I know I could have gone over more about chapter 17, probably will a little bit in the future, but that basically like ties in. Right now we're kind of dealing with the Megalomania assignment, so I'm really trying to just stay focused on that. So let's get that done, you know, make sure you get that done on Monday, by Monday. And again, you'll have a rewrite I'll be doing in 2 weeks. When we get back in 2 weeks, after the spring break, I'm saying, you know, you will, we'll be doing another assignment, deal with data journalism, and also we'll be talking about our final assignment, believe it or not already. So that'll be the video that'll be released on the 18th, okay? So this actually is our last video until then, okay? So you obviously won't get a video during spring break. So, all right. Thank you very much, everybody, and let me know if you have any questions, and if you haven't gotten to me about the lead yet for the Megalomania assignment, please do. Thank you.